This NFL Christmas Day and Thursday night football player props edition of the Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code MACHINE to get a 50% deposit bonus of up to $1,000. We're also brought to you by Rhythm, the leader in data-driven picks and props. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM.
It as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Metcalf.
Welcome everyone to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Early here to get into the Thursday night football game for NFL Week 17, and of course, this season, for whatever reason, the NFL wants to take away from the NBA action on Christmas Day. But we got two games on Wednesday for Christmas Day. I can't be too mad because my team is playing on Christmas Day, but heartbreak, I will say this for my Texans, but we'll get into that momentarily, of course. But joining me, kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule, of course. I texted him last night. We figured it out this morning. We put it together. We wanted to get something out for you guys, but appreciate, of course, my guy, ChrisBeCappinn. Chris, what's going on, my man? How you doing? I appreciate you, man.
No, absolutely. You know, we do this thing every week, and it's no break for the weary. We out here punching them out, knocking them out, you know, trying to make some money for ourselves and for our listeners as well. So, yeah, we're just doing our job. You know, I'm excited to be here. I do think that it's going to be interesting. This is the first year, of course, we've had football on Sunday, which brings a different dynamic. We talked a little bit about, you know, NFL not, you know, caring too much about its players, maybe with them just coming off a game, and you know, eventually they're gonna be playing, you know, back to backs like the NBA sooner or later, you know. Oh, but I'm excited to jump into them. I do think we have some pretty good games, some marquee matchups, some key players for sure that should be able to get us to some of these numbers that we like today. You know?
Yeah. You know, we talk about in the NBA 3 games in 4 nights. Well, you have now NFL teams playing 3 games in 11 days now. And I think the 4 teams, obviously, that are playing this year on Christmas Day are in the midst of that right now. So we'll talk about all of that. We'll try to keep it short and concise here for you guys so you guys can consume it and listen to everything before Christmas Day, get your bets in and whatever the case might be as well. So, Chris, let's not waste any time here, man. We'll talk about some injury stuff happening. You know, when we get to the, if anything in particular, player props are related to that. But let's dive into it. I'll let you lead off here. Player prop number 1, man. What do you got?
All right, so let's go quarterbacks. A couple I was looking at, you know, this was a hard market for me to kind of solidify one. So I'll give you one, and then I might save 1 to 2. We'll see how much time we got left towards honorable mention. But I think what jumps out to me the most, you know, is Caleb Williams. Like, we got some really good quarterbacks playing. We got, you know, Lamar Jackson. We got C.J. Stroud. We got Patrick Mahomes. But Caleb Williams kind of jumped out to me. His passing plus rushing yards, you know, if he you know, got a line sitting at about 242.5, it looks like. And he's been good recently, specifically at home. In these home games is what I kind of isolated to. But even just overall, even a couple of the road games, he's played really, really well. And I am expecting this to, you know, him to have to use his arm and his legs for them to find some success in this game. So I'm going through last 5 games. It's looking like he's averaging about 278 rushing plus receiving yards, hitting the over in 3 of the last 5 games. On the season, he's averaging more than this line of 242.5 at about 248, it looks like. And then we you know, kind of look at some of his recent games, strong performances. They're coming off a game against Detroit where they got down super early. He had to pass the ball and run the ball in that game. I think he finished with 34 rushing yards, 334 passing yards. So he crushed this number, 368. But even before that, 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, 373 rushing plus receiving yards. He's using his legs a little bit more, you know, at 33 rushing yards in that game. 3 weeks ago, another divisional opponent, 30 rushing yards in that game against Green Bay, 300 yards passing in that game as well. And I do like it that, you know, I typically want to bet on the team or the player that doesn't have to travel in these games, right? We know that the Seahawks will be traveling cross country to come to Chicago.
Yep.
Where I think the environment, might be a little bit different for them with them playing outside, in Chicago and cold Chicago. So yeah, this is a number that, like I said, kind of really, jumped off the page to me, specifically in his home games. He's up and over 5 of the last 6 games. And like I said, I think the onus will be on Caleb Williams for this team to find some success here. So I'll go Caleb Williams combining his rushing plus passing yards, over 242.5 to get things started.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in his home games, he's been really good, right? 8 home games this season, averaging 225.6 passing yards per game, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. You compare to that 7 road games this season, drops down to 209.4 passing yards per game, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So he's been really good on the road, at home this season, where they are on Thursday Night Football. Also, he has 269 rushing yards at home this season compared to the 173 on the road. So, obviously being in his rookie season here, Chris, a little bit more comfortable at home. And I think it also is on what really jumped out to me about Caleb Williams when you were mentioning him, and I was looking at his home and road splits. Home completion percentage, 66.3 for Caleb Williams. It drops down to 57.9 on the road here. So feels very, very comfortable at home, this Caleb Williams. So yeah, I think I definitely would be with you on this one before I would be against you. All right. I didn't really have a quarterback prop that just really jumped out to me. I think I'll say the one for honorable mentions. Trying to just find one more injury news information for that particular game there. So I'll start it here with one of my favorite ones for this week, and it is going to be Dalton Schultz over on his receiving yards for the Houston Texans. And obviously, we saw the devastating knee injury for Tank Dell. Expect him to miss the entirety of next season as well. If he does come back, it'll probably be at the tail end of the year if the Texans are in contention for the playoffs. But it's gut wrenching just because of everything that he's been through. But so hopefully, he has a speedy recovery, and he can just get back on the field and just be the guy that he's been for this Texans team. So obviously, when you have those type of players missing for this Texans team, we already missed Stephon Diggs with a torn ACL there as well. I think it's a good spot for Dalton Schultz, Chris. And we've talked a lot about throughout the season just tight ends having success against the Baltimore Ravens, right? Their rush defense this season has been really good outside of when you play Saquon Barkley. I mean, Saquon Barkley is just, just ramming down every single opponent that he does face. But you take a look at the tight ends this season against the Baltimore Ravens, they're averaging close to 59 receiving yards per game on 5.53 receptions per game on 7.33 targets. And, last week I know that the Steelers tight end room only had 20 receiving yards in that game. But prior to that, the Giants had 35. Dallas Goedert had 35 week prior. Will Dissly, we talked about, he had 47 a couple weeks ago against the Steelers. Combined, they had 56. We talked about the Bengals, Tanner Hudson, 42, Mike Gesicki, 30. I think it's just more of a play here for me, Chris, that number one, yes, tight ends have had success, but it's also availability, right, for this Texans team. They picked up Deontay Johnson. I wouldn't expect him to be involved at all in this game. I know John Mechie is a probably good angle as well as a pivot here, maybe Robert Woods as well. But I do think that since Dalton Schultz has been able to be here majority of the season for the Texans team, that him and CJ and Nico Collins all kind of have that chemistry together. But I do like Dalton Schultz in this game against the Baltimore Ravens to get over his number of 34.5 is a number I do see right now for him. Let me see if I can find a better number right now on that, Chris. But the first play prop for me will be here, Dalton Schultz over 34.5 receiving yards. That's currently over on DraftKings. You could get a 33.5 right now if you have Bet Rivers, but 34.5 is consensus right now, Chris.
Yeah, you mentioned it, and I got a player prop that I'm going to be targeting because of the injury to Tank Dell. Get well soon, Tank Dell. You hate to see an injury like that. I'm pretty sure he was happy that he was able to hold on to the ball. At least that's his lasted memory from the season, because he did catch a touchdown, while going down with that devastating injury. But yeah, outside of losing a a key player like Tank Dell, somebody that can stretch the field, you also are playing against one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, right? We know Baltimore does a really good job of limiting the run, number one in rush defense, and the opposite against the pass. They're giving up the most receiving yards allowed in the NFL at 273 per game so far this season. So, I mean, this is a really good, I'm sorry, more than 273. That's just against the tight end position specifically, which ranks them, bottom 5 against tight ends. So this is a really good matchup for Dalton Schultz. I think, not even looking at the necessary, trends of how he's been doing recently. I do see he's up and over in 2 of the 3. And if he goes over, he typically goes way over 34.5. The games that he's gone over is 40 or more. So hopefully you're not sweating this one out, of late. I do think that, it's going to be a really good outing for CJ Stroud and his ability to be able to utilize his legs and his arm for your Texans to find some success and probably playing from behind in that game as well as 5.5 point dogs against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, we talked about the Chiefs also being a team that struggles against the tight ends. The obviously Texans played the Chiefs last week. In that game, Schultz had 45 receiving yards for the Texans offense there, 8 targets. Prior to that, against the Jacksonville Jaguars, 61 receiving yards against them. So I think it's a good opportunity here for Schultz. And I want to say historically he has done well against the Ravens. I'll just double check that before I let you get into player prop number 2 for yourself.
I think it was 45, is what I saw. It was 40 plus, right? In the last game. I know you're probably looking it up right now. You see it?
And the last game against the Chiefs?
Mm-hmm. Well, not the Chiefs, was it against the Chiefs?
The last game against the Chiefs, last week, he had 45 receiving yards on 8 targets and 5 receptions. I was just trying to see how he's done against the Ravens in his career.
So that was 40 plus the last time, right?
Yeah, so they played last season. He only had 4, but then there was a game against the Cowboys back in 2020 where he had 44 receiving yards against them. So
that's what I saw. Okay.
Yeah, should be a big week here for Schultz, at least to get over this number of 34.5 right now. All right, Chris, before we do get into player prop number 2 here, let me just remind everybody about Underdog Fantasy. A great time right now to get over to Underdog Fantasy with Christmas Day on deck, right? You're going to be with friends and family throughout the day. You're going to be watching the sports. Let's put some extra money back into your pockets with Underdog Fantasy, because Underdog Pick'em, they have one of the biggest menus for all sports. You can win up to 1,000x with Underdog Streaks. Underdog is always making it easier with profit boosts and gimme pick'ems, NFL, college football, college basketball, MMA, NBA, NASCAR, and more. And you can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries. So sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. That's underdogfantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code MACHINE. All right, Chris, let's keep it rolling here, man. Let's get over to player prop number 2. What do you got?
So I'll stay traditional, and take a running back here. And same game, but for a lot of the same reasons that you talked about and that we mentioned already, Joe Mixon up and over his 18.5 receiving yards here. Initially, I wanted to go under on his rushing yards, but just because we know Baltimore is a elite rush defense, but I'll play Joe Mixon up and over. I think he's a reliable target that can go out there and catch some of those dump off. I see Casey mentioned it in the chat. She says Mixon should get a lot of those targets too. And I agree with that. He's actually up and over 18.5 receiving yards in 4 of his 6 games. And one of them he barely missed. So, that shows some consistency in his role specifically. Over the last 5 games, he's averaging about 27 receiving yards, which is well above this number of 18.5. I think this number will continue to move as we get closer to game time. On the season, he's up and over, averaging about 24.5. That's pretty comfortably over this number as well. When he's playing at home, that number jumps to north of 30 yards receiving. And I think he has 100% hit rate in those games as well at home this season. And we talk about it, right? Baltimore, against the running back position specifically, they give up the receiving yards because they do such a great job, limiting teams from being able to run the football. So I do think, with his with their vulnerability to running backs and pass catchers out of the backfield, that this is a matchup for Joe Mixon that he should be able to exploit. Last week, just on the full season, Baltimore's averaging about 42 yards allowed to the running back position on a weekly basis. I think, a lot of check down potential here for CJ Stroud. And Baltimore has an aggressive defense, I think, which could also lead to the dump downs And I think, when I think about the game, I initially looked at CJ Stroud over his pass attempts, and that's because I do think that they're going to have to pass the football. Baltimore, as I mentioned already, still number one against the rush, but we've seen them be vulnerable against the pass, specifically to the running back. So we'll go we'll go Joe Mixon up and over 18.5 receiving yards. Best number I found was minus 115 over on BetMGM. I would play this up to 20.5 as well, though.
Yeah, I couldn't talk you off of this one as well. He's been involved in the passing game. We know it. You just take a look at the numbers. I know last week he only had 14 receiving yards, but I think that you mentioned how great, and it's the same thing we talk about every single week with how great Minnesota's rush defense is, how great Baltimore's rush defense is, and how do you get your running backs involved in the game? You do it through the air, right? And I think Joe Mixon has done a great job this season for this Texans team getting involved in the passing game. 291 receiving yards on the season for Joe Mixon, averaging 8.8 yards per reception. In those spots, he has 33 receptions there as well. So I think, not really necessarily checkdowns, but I think in those flats, those swing passes, screen passes, I think that's going to be available for Joe Mixon in this game here to go over his receiving yards in this game. So I think that's a great way to get him involved in the passing game for CJ Stroud and the Texans offense. All right. For my next player prop, I'm going to go over to the Thursday Night Football game, Seahawks and the Chicago Bears. I wanted to get behind Kenneth Walker in some way in this game, but I just don't see his props listed quite yet. Maybe just waiting to see on his injury news here. Let me just double check here. If not, then I can pivot to another player prop in another game, of course. Let me just see if any other book has them up. Not quite yet. All right, so let me pivot here. Let me go to the game between the Steelers and the Chiefs. And we talked about same theme here, how good the tight ends have been against teams like the Ravens and the Chiefs. So I'm looking at Mr. Pat Freiermuth in this game. His number's at 29.5, like the over in that spot. We'll keep an eye on George Pickens if he's able to go this week here, Chris. Seems like indications are that he should be able to go, because I do see his props listed. But nonetheless, we talked about the Ravens and their defense against the tight end position. Chiefs, they're allowing 72.67 receiving yards per game to the tight end position. We go back last week, we talked about Dalton Schultz. He had 45 yards in that game. Jordan Akins as well for the Browns in place of David Njoku, 30. Stone Smart had 54 receiving yards. Brock Bowers went absolutely bonkers against the Chiefs, 10 receptions, 140 yards. Jatavion Sanders, 3 for 49. Dawson Knox for 40. So you guys get the picture of what I'm trying to say. Just continue betting on tight ends against the Kansas City Chiefs here. And we look at Pat Freiermuth's stats this season, right? Maybe doesn't really jump a whole heck of a lot off of the page. A lot of inconsistencies. Last 2 weeks, he's only combined for 38 receiving yards. But prior to that, against the Browns, he had 48, 68 against the Bengals, 59 against the Cleveland Browns. I think it's a good opportunity for him here, Chris, to continue at least being involved in the offense. And also the part of it here, Chris, is that I'm not asking him to do a whole heck of a lot. I'm just asking him to get me 30 yards in this game. Some of the other players that we've talked about, they haven't really we talk about players that have these high prop numbers that are set, and we expect them to do a lot. But, this is a guy that could get this done in 3-4 catches. I think the targets are going to be there for him in this game. He's had at least 3 targets in 5 straight games. He's had at least 4 targets in 3 of the last 5 games as well. So I do think this is a good opportunity for Pat Freiermuth here for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense to really contribute. I see the best number right now, 28.5 over on BetMGM, FanDuel, and Bet365. So I'll give it out at 28.5 here, Chris. Pat Freiermuth up and over that number.
Yeah, I like it. I like it this one, because as you mentioned, it's just a really good matchup, right? We're expecting this Kansas City defense to continue to be really, really good, top 5-ish against the rush. which should slow down Warren and just that backfield in general. And that's gonna lead to them having to be able to pass the football here. But I'm looking at, while you were talking, I went and looked at just Fairmouth's reception, and the receiving prop is 2.5, and it's like really juiced towards the over. So you're needing them to average about 9.5 yards per carry, 9.5 yards per catch, which seems really doable. I see 28.5, like you mentioned, minus 110 on BetMGM is the best number. But this is up to 30.5 on a couple books already. So definitely line moving up in this one, instead of down. So I like it. I think it's a really good look.
All right, let's get over to player prop number 3. Chris, what do you got?
All right, so let's go. You know what? I gave out one. I'll save that one for honorable mention, but I'll come back to Nico Collins. I like Nico Collins a lot this week. I know you mentioned a couple of the other wide receivers on the team, but I think Nico Collins is going to take the top off the defense this week. But we'll come back to him. Longest reception, I've got to give out at least one longest rush, longest reception, one of the two. Jackson Smith-Njigba, up and over. Number is 23.5. I do think that's exploitable against that Chicago Bears defense that can really give up big plays. If I was going through the game logs and I didn't feel like I had to make it too far. Didn't have to make it too far to see some of the big plays that the secondary has given up so far. You can look just back to last week against the Detroit Lions. Jameson Williams had an 82-yarder in that game. Same game, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 28-yarder. Same game, Jahmyr Gibbs, 23-yarder. And then they played against the division rival Minnesota Vikings the week before. And they did a pretty good job of not giving up too many big plays in that game, even though Justin Jefferson did have a 21-yarder. But this is all about, what we think, well, at least what I think of the Seattle Seahawks offense. And that's just an extremely pass first, pass happy offense that, has Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I think I gave his player prop out maybe 4 weeks ago. He's been crushing this number ever since. I think I went, just receiving yards over. But it's been ever since DK Metcalf went down with that injury, even though he's been back. He just continues to go up and over the number. He's up and over. Jackson Smith-Njigba has a 25-yard reception in 5 straight games. And 6 of the last 7. So we know that, there's going to be a situation where the ball's going to get thrown down the field by Geno Smith. He's not looking for a lot of those intermediate plays. If he has no problem, trying to take the top off the defense, and Jackson Smith-Njigba has been really good for him being able to do just that. So I'll go Jackson Smith-Njigba up and over his longest receiving prop. There is a 22.5 out there on FanDuel, juice to minus 122, but we'll go 23.5, which is consensus on most books, no juice at all.
Yeah, let me double check another book here because I'm seeing consensus 22.5, but sometimes you just got to go in there and check. 22.5 also available on DraftKings. So you have two prominent books there in FanDuel and DraftKings that have 22.5 available. This is a great find here, Chris. I mean, I love this. I'm going to bet this one myself as well. You mentioned you nailed the handicap, right? Like we know with Njigba that he could be a down the field threat, but he's also a guy that can, catch a short pass and utilize his speed to get over on his longest reception here. So you mentioned he's done this in 5 straight weeks. 6 of the last 7. Yep. Yeah, so I definitely love it. And just looking at the road games, 24 against the Cardinals, 25 against the Jets. Did fall a little bit short against the Niners. No shame there. But again, he's done this more times than not, especially recently for this Seattle Seahawks offense, who are, again, in a very, very desperate spot here to get a victory if they want to keep any chance of playoff hopes alive for this Seahawks team. All right, for my last player prop, at least for our round of 3 here, and you mentioned the longest reception. I'm going to go with the longest completion here. Russell Wilson over the number of, let's see here. This was 37.5, I think was the number. Let me double check. 36.5 over on DraftKings right now. And I know we do get, or possibly do get George Pickens back here, and he's been the guy really for that team that's been that down the field threat. for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe it goes to Pat Freiermuth for 39 yards, and I could get this done in one clip here. But he's actually been really, really good, getting the ball down the field. And I know it cooled off a little bit in those two games against the Browns and the Eagles, where he wasn't able to get over that number. But even last week without George Pickens, there was a catch of 44 yards for a Steelers receiver there. And then I think that you still have Calvin Austin, obviously a guy that's a down the field threat. Hopefully George Pickens does end up playing in this game. He does have a big reception in this game here, Chris. But we know Russell Wilson has one of the more accurate deep ball passes in the entire NFL as far as quarterbacks go. And I think it's a good opportunity here for, again, a Chiefs team that is really good against the run as well. So I think that it's going to have to be on the shoulders of Russell Wilson in this game. So I do like Russell Wilson, longest completion to go over 36.5 yards in this game here, Chris.
Yeah, back to the old bread and butter here, with Russell Wilson getting the ball deep down the field as well. This is a very similar handicap, in my opinion, to Geno Smith and Jackson Smith and the Jigba being able to connect on a deep one. Russell, for what it's worth, we talk about, his stint in Denver last year and, just really not gelling well at all with the system because, he wanted to hold on to the ball maybe for a little bit too long. And, that's not what they wanted to do over there. But he's letting that thing go down the field. Whenever he throws it, it feels like, it's primarily a deep pass. And I think that that's something that kind of keeps the defense honest because we know Baltimore, for as long as I've been alive, it feels like loves that smash mouth kind of football. So they want to run the ball, but you have to be able to, to have a plan B and to, get the ball deep down the field on some of those play actions and not, necessarily, set yourself up too much to be to not, to be what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you just don't want to be too predictable is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be too predictable. So I do think, with his ability to stretch the floor, it makes a ton of sense for him to be able to get one up and over. I know I gave out who was it? Josh Allen last week, and it was the only week in the last 10 weeks that he hasn't thrown a deep pass, but I like the one here. You said what, 36.5, I might tell.
36.5. Yeah, I think that since that, not last week Baltimore game, but the one they played earlier this season, 37, 46, 43. And then, like I mentioned, those 2 weeks without George Pickens, 22 and 31, but without Pickens last week against Baltimore, he did have one for 44. So, hopefully Pickens is back this week. He can get him that down the field throw. But I do think there's other guys on this team that are definitely capable of getting those long passes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, if this is a game where they are trailing, like we anticipate against the Chiefs, I think it's an opportunity for Russell Wilson to really air it out here and get that longest completion. All right. So those are 3 player props each for myself and Chris. Before we get into honorable mentions here for the games for Wednesday and Thursday, let me just remind everybody about our good old pals over at mybookie.ag. MyBookie.ag has been running on SGPN for years. Check out their new and improved website, great on mobile, plus props for every game in the live dealer casino. They even have a new early cash out option that's available there as well. Definitely going to use their player prop builder for the Christmas Day games. Going to put it in my favorite plays, of course, Chris's as well. I'm going to utilize their prop player as well. It's really convenient. It's really easy to put together as well. So head over to mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. That's mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN. And we're also brought to you by Rhythm. SGPN's prop partner Rhythm is the #1 AI-powered back sports betting platform that helps provide bettors of all levels the ability to build custom predictive betting models in seconds and get predictions for betting on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top performing models from the leaderboard, or have Rhythm build a model for you. Now you can track props in the Rhythm app, NFL picks, NFL props, college football, college basketball, NBA, Rhythm. Honestly, they have it all. And this week on the Rhythm app, they do like Caleb Williams to go over on his passing yards in this game of 215.5. They are predicting he's going to have 237.5 passing yards in this game for Thursday night football. So just correlates there with what Chris likes for Caleb Williams this week. So claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. All right, Chris, let's get into some honorable mentions here. Then we'll get into touchdown scores, and then we'll wrap it up with best bets here. What were you looking at? Trying to get to the window with? Need some pushing to? What do you got?
So let's go first with your boy CJ Stroud. We talked a little bit about it, but pass attempts. I know 33.5 is a significant number, but I just think about Baltimore's defense. I think about you guys potentially playing from behind in this game. I think about how Baltimore forces teams to pass the ball at the highest rate in the NFL. And I think about, specifically in this game, how I think it could be played with a low pace. Houston, you guys are passing the ball 59% pass rate, and compared to only 41% pass rate, 41% rush rate. I'm sorry. And that's after, Caleb Williams, not Caleb Williams, CJ Stroud last week threw the ball 39 times against the Kansas City Chiefs. Another really great run stopping defense. So that one feels like, I don't know, 33.5 is, the books are going to set it high. They're not going to give you a gift, right? Even though it is Christmas time. But I think 35 attempts is coming from CJ Stroud this week, So that's one I wanted your thoughts on. The next one, of course, that one, of course, I know you probably thought that we talked about that one. Derrick Henry was somebody that was on my list, his longest rush attempt. I know that he's on the road. I know that you guys are not the worst defense against the rush, but his longest rush, up and over, he was actually on my short list last week as well against a really good run defense. And, he did whatever he wanted to against them. But up and over his 19.5 longest rush, it's just like more of a trend play. I just know that Baltimore's going to run the ball a lot. We both know Baltimore's going to run the ball a lot. And you just need him to break one for 20 yards. And he's done so. Last 15 games, he's cashing 73% of the time. Last 10 games, he's cashed 70% of the time. So that's 7 of the last 10. And like I said, Kareem Hunt, last week had a 20-yarder. 2 weeks ago, it was Tank Bigsby against you guys, had a 19-yarder. 3 weeks ago, it was Tony Pollard, who had a 27-yarder. So I wanted your thoughts on Derrick Henry up and over his longest rush attempt, over 19.5. CJ over on his pass attempts, and then Nico. I feel like I want to play Nico in some way. I don't know if it's the 89.5 receiving yards that I see available on BetMGM right now. This is up to 92 on a couple books. Or his receiving prop, exception prop, 6.5, up from 5.5 as well. And we talked about it. No Tank Dell. Nico's been the primary target for CJ Stroud, of course. He leads the team in red zone targets, averaging 15 yards per reception. So I didn't know if I wanted to go, receiving yards or reception prop, but we know, the Ravens defense allows 174 receiving yards per game just to the wide receiver position specifically. And I think Nico is going to get up for the game. I think that you guys are competitors, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be easy for the Baltimore Ravens. I think that you guys are going to stick, tooth and nails in that game. So wanted your thoughts on those three specifically. How would we play Nico? Is it receiving yards or receptions? Also with Derrick Henry, any thoughts on his longest rush over 19.5? And then last but not least, your boy CJ Stroud up and over his 33.5 pass attempts.
Yeah, I'll start here with Nico. The one thing that really sticks out to me about Nico is that his numbers have been very consistent both on the road and at home, averaging a little bit more yards per game at home at 94.6, 6.2 receptions per game at home as well. But also all 6 of his touchdowns have come at home this season as well. So I think for me, it would probably be the receptions for him. Last week, we saw he had 10 targets, finished with 7 receptions, and I'd be curious to go back and kind of look, and maybe we can do this here very, very quickly, that games where he's had 10 or more targets, what his receptions numbers has been. So he's been targeted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games where he's had double-digit targets. 5 of those 6 games, Chris, he's had at least 7 receptions for the Texans. So I think that if the targets are going to be there, like I think we are expecting to, especially without Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, that he does get over the receptions. It is at 6.5, but I think I'm so comfortable with that number.
Plus money too, over on ESPN Bet right now, and I see it all the way down to 15 cent over on DraftKings. So definitely can get in early if you like, and it's open at 5.5, so it's already being bet up. And I'm thinking that we probably won't have plus money, especially if we think that the game is going to be played, with you guys potentially trailing. I could see, Nico. We know what Nico Collins is. We don't have to talk about who he is.
Yeah.
But I think the targets will be there. Which, in my opinion, the receptions will be there as well. 8.6 targets per game. 5.6 receptions per game. 24% target share in the 5 games this season that's been played without Stephon Diggs, just Stephon Diggs. Yep. So now we add Tank Dell to the mix, and I do think it's going to be a big game for your boy Nico Collins.
Yeah, so I would look at, I think that, receptions would be my preferred play here. But again, I would not be surprised if he does get into 100 receiving yards in this game for the Texans. Derrick Henry, familiar territory for him, has played against the Texans a lot, obviously, when he was with the Tennessee Titans, has absolutely owned the Texans. And you could make the case, or I think you would agree with this, Chris, that he has a better offensive line here with the Baltimore Ravens than he did with the Tennessee Titans. But if you kind of just take a look at his numbers against the Texans throughout his career, they just honestly, you have to kind of do a double take, because there was a stretch where he had 3 straight games against the Texans where he had 200 or more rushing yards against this team. I'm sorry, 4 straight games. Cooled off a little bit over the last season. Only had combined 51 rushing yards. But again, motivation at that point for the Tennessee Titans, their season wasn't, much to be or anything was going to transpire as far as postseason. But now you have him coming back here against the Texans. I think I would be on this play here with you on his longest rush attempt to go over. I want to say recently the rush defense has not fared very well for this team. You mentioned the numbers. They did pretty good against the Chiefs this past week, but we're talking about the longest rush to go over. So with guys like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, especially this season, it's like almost an auto bet every single week. So I would be with you on that before I would be against you. CJ Stroud, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's something similar to the Chiefs as well, that where the rush defense has been really good this season, that he may be forced to throw the football. And we probably want him to throw the football in this game because we're talking about Dalton Schultz. We like his receiving yards. We want the Nico angle as well for CJ Stroud in this game here. So I don't think that Joe Mixon is going to be able to do a lot on the ground at least. So maybe, again, like you like his receiving yards. We like Nico. We like Dalton Schultz on their receiving yards. So he's going to have to throw the football. So I think that is a good opportunity for him also to throw the football in this game. Kind of looking at his home and road splits here, Chris, he's averaging close to 35 attempts per game at home this season, 31.5 on the road thus far this season as well. He's averaging 261.6 yards per game through the air at home and drops down to 207.6 on the road here. So obviously, being comfortable in the confined space of NRG Stadium, I think this has to be a CJ Stroud game if he wants to pull off the upset victory here for the Texans. So, yeah. I was, for my honorable mentions, Kenneth Walker, I was looking at his receiving yards. That number hasn't popped up yet. Kind of waiting on his injury news, if he's going to be able to go in this game or not. It is a short week. Did make his return last week. Let me just double check if there is any news here. He did suffer an ankle injury on Sunday. So if he's not able to go, maybe we see Zach Charbonnet, of course, fill in there. I think also it seems like he is going to be doubtful for this game here. So I'll scratch that one off the list then. Outside of that, I really didn't have much as far as honorable mentions go. You talked about the pass attempts for CJ Stroud. I think, Chris, we can make the same argument for Russell Wilson. I know he's not a guy that doesn't throw the football a lot, but when you're talking about this Chiefs defense, I think that you're going to have to throw the football against him because, again, there's 2 cases that he can get up over his pass attempts. It's at 30.5 for Russell Wilson. So we take a look at, since I'm going to go back to let's go back to week 11. 40 for Josh Allen, 35 for Bryce Young, 35 for Aiden O'Connell, 30 for Justin Herbert. And then the last 2 weeks, Chris, Jameis Winston, and then Dorian Thompson Robinson came in DTR. They combined for 34 pass attempts. And then last week, like you mentioned, CJ Stroud had 39. So it's Russell Wilson. I'm a little bit weary about it. But again, if they are in a game script situation, Chris, where they are trailing, then he's going to have to throw the football. I think 30.5 was a little bit conservative for him. So I would look at that for Russell Wilson in this game. You have any thoughts on Wilson or anything else?
Yeah, no. You hit the nail on the head. It's really, especially when we have this much data this deep into the season, it's really defense versus matchups, right?
Yeah.
And you just mentioned it, right? If we're thinking that they're going to have some success, which I'm interested, we're not going to make the show even longer than it already has been. But I thought that you would have threw out a little Jalen Warren up and over his receiving yards as well.
I was
just to kind of correlate
that, yeah. So I was looking for the number for that. He's at 19.5. That number does seem a little bit conservative for Jalen Warren. And Chris, it's the exact same handicap we have for Joe Mixon on why you like his receiving yards to go over. Well, take a look here before we get to touchdown scores for the games here. But 44 last week, 3 against the Eagles. All right, 25, 55, 19, 27, 29. So again, this is back to last season where we talked about this a whole heck of a lot. So yeah, I might add this one to the card. I'll dig a little bit more into it, but I think that's a great point that you bring up for Jalen Warren here. All right, let's get into touchdown scores here. Chris, who do you like to find the end zone this week?
All right, so let's start with you guys' game. I was so surprised, that you could get Nico Collins at plus 138. I feel like I had to. I feel like I absolutely had to, man. Nico Collins at plus 138. He scored in 4 of the last 7 games, leads the Texans in red zone targets. We talk about all that. The Ravens allow almost 2 touchdowns per game through the air because of their strong rush defense. So we start off with Nico Collins. I also feel like Joe Mixon will find the end zone. I know I talked about his receiving yards going up and over, but I think he could find the end zone, either on the ground or through the air. I am expecting you guys to be able to score the football. I don't think it's going to be a lopsided win at all. So Joe Mixon is minus 120, which is a lot better odds than we found for Joe Mixon recently. So I do like, not giving out too many, minus money plays, but I do like Joe Mixon at minus 120 on DraftKings to be able to find pay dirt this week as well. Like I said, whether it's receiving or rushing. On the opposite side, up in the same game, Mark Andrews really kind of putting it together recently. 4 straight games with a touchdown, 9 red zone touchdowns this season. Texans do allow the 3rd most red zone touchdowns in general. So when teams get to get down there against you guys, they are scoring. So I think, he should be able to find pay dirt this week. Pretty good number on, on Mark Andrews. And then we'll go with the other guy that I really like as well, and that's Jackson Smith-Njigba against the Chicago Bears. 5 touchdowns in his last 7 games. We talked about him being a workhorse, for Geno Smith. 12 targets in back-to-back games. And it's a Bears defense that's been giving it up to the wide receiver position. We just mentioned, Amon-Ra St. Brown and James Williams last week. But even if you continue to go back, I think I was looking at it after we, kind of talked a little bit about it. Even in that game 3 weeks ago, they were giving it up to San Francisco in that game. I think you were on George Kittle in that game. He had a really good game in that one. And Jawan Jennings also had a really good game in that one. So I do think that Jackson Smith-Njigba has a lot of success, and I like him to find pay dirt as this week as well. So we'll go Nico Collins plus 138. We'll go Joe Mixon. We'll go Mark Andrews, and then we'll finish it off with Jackson Smith-Njigba for myself.
Like it, yeah, 100% agree on Nico Collins. Like we mentioned, all of his touchdowns have come at home this season, so we'll get that plus odds for him there. Joe Mixon was, I think, flirting with minus 200, if not beyond, on his anytime touchdown. So again, when we're just
buying the dip, we're buying the dip here.
100%. So I do like that. It's a good call there for Nico and Joe Mixon. We're still chasing that Travis Kelce one to set that franchise record for touchdown receptions for the Chiefs. Plus 175. I'll give it one more shot here. Maybe it's, he gets it done in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. So I like Travis Kelce plus 175. And then you mentioned Jackson Smith and Jigba. I like the odds on that one for sure. Keenan Allen has been another guy that's been able to find the end zone for the Chicago Bears thus far this season. He's around plus 210 currently over on DraftKings. Again, like we always say, definitely shop around for the best number. So I'll give you those three guys. Keenan Allen, love Nico, co-sign that with you as well. And then Travis Kelce. I'll give him one more chance here before Swift Army comes after me and I or what do they call them? Swifties come after me for shaming him for not getting a touchdown since I've been chasing it for the past several weeks. All right. Best bets time here, Chris. Let's wrap it up strong here. I'll let you lead off. Best bet. What do you got?
All right. So best bet, we are going to go back, I'm going to your boy, I'm going Joe Mixon up and over his receiving yards here, 18.5. We talked about Baltimore giving up the most receiving yards to the running back position because they're so strong against the rush. And this is a number that he's up and over, like I said, 4 of the last 6 games. Game script says that you guys probably going to be playing from behind, a lot of dump downs to Joe Mixon. And he goes up and over this number pretty easily. If I like this up to 20.5. So Joe Mixon up and over 18.5, minus 115 available right now on BetMGM. Best bet.
All right. Love it. Hopefully it's a big game for Joe Mixon. I think I'll stay with the Texans as well. Give me Dalton Schultz to go over his number. 33.5 is the best number you can get. Let me double check that. It hasn't moved as we have been recording here. I'll give that consensus 34.5 because the only one that's available is at BetRivers at 33.5. But FanDuel right now, 34.5, but it is on the move to 35.5 there. So I'll split the difference there, 34.5. But I do think that he can get 40 plus in this game here. We talked about how much success the tight end position has had against the Baltimore Ravens this season. I think that continues here. Give me Dalton Schultz over 34.5 receiving yards. So 2 best bets from the same game here. Let's go Joe Mixon. Let's go Dalton Schultz. Let's go Texans. Hopefully we can pull off the victory on Christmas Day. All right, last but not least, Chris has put together our Underdog Fantasy entry for the Christmas Day games here. Thursday Night Football, and of course Christmas Day on Wednesday here. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and put in Joe Mixon, and I'll go ahead and put in Dalton Schultz here. Let me just search for it. So Dalton Schultz, the number's at 35.5 currently over on Underdog. We'll go higher on that, and then we'll go Joe Mixon. Let's see here. Joe Mixon, his receiving yards at 17.5. So we'll go higher on that. And then I really like your Caleb Williams call, Chris, on his rushing and passing. Let me see if they have.
I almost made that the best bet. I almost made that. I do like Caleb Williams a lot this week. I do.
Yeah. I think it's a good matchup for him. You want to go pass and rushing, or you just want to go passing?
Let's go passing and rushing. I think he'll utilize his legs and both his arms and his legs. Whatever the defense takes, I think he'll whatever the defense gives him, I think he'll take this week.
All right, we'll go with that. So we're gonna go with Dalton Schultz, higher 35.5 receiving yards. Joe Mixon, higher 17.5 receiving yards, and then we'll go Caleb Williams on Thursday to give ourselves a sweat if those first 2 entries do get to the window, with Caleb Williams pass and rushing higher 244.5 for this Thursday night football game. All right, that's going to do it here for this edition of the Propcast. Killed 2 birds with 1 stone here, Christmas Day and Thursday night football player props mixed in from honestly all 3 games there. So this was a great episode. We'll be back on Friday, hopefully for the Sunday games as well. Look out for us then. Chris, any parting words for our listeners before we go our separate ways?
Happy holidays, man. We appreciate everybody that's ever listened to any of our podcasts and, tailed any of our plays. Hopefully you guys, get a chance to spend it with your loved ones. Have a very, very Merry Christmas. Enjoy some sports, eat some good food, and make some memories, man. Happy holidays to all of our listeners,
Yeah, 200% echoing everything Chris just said. Happy holidays. Hope you guys have a great Christmas. New Year's next week as well. So, enjoy this time with your friends, with family, create those memories because this is honestly the best time of the year, really, especially when you have, little ones around as well. So hopefully it is a profitable one as well. But just want to also thank all the listeners, if you've been here with us day one for the Propcast, or whether you've tuned in on this latest episode, and if you've been with us throughout the season, definitely appreciate everybody that's tapped in with us for the Propcast. All right, we'll be back on Friday for the Sunday game, so look out for us then. Till then, enjoy your holidays, and we'll talk to you guys on Friday. But always remember to let it ride.